goes on Zoom. Subject matter for our next. So lovely people. I love that we've kept it casual. So we have Max and Erik are our two artists for the evening, and they collaborated together last February and March in order to bring our first iteration of an Iliad almost to, I would say, to almost full artistic fruition, missing only an audience, as it made its way all the way to the final dress rehearsal before things were canceled last March. And we hope that they will be together in person as soon as this Tuesday, as we plan to begin rehearsals for an Iliad Take Two this May. And we'll talk a little bit later about how it is that they are thinking of an Iliad, that they thought of an Iliad then during the last time together, and then how they are thinking of an Iliad now as they prepare to work together again. But I always love to begin these sessions just by hearing the very beginning of folks' origin story in the theater, and especially for Max and Erik, because there's a few points of intersection that I would also like to ask them to speak to. So perhaps Erik first, and then Max, could you give a sort of brief comic book style history of how it is that you came to be a person of the theater, your origin story in the theater?
Yeah, totally. So I I guess from when I was young, I was always very comfortable performing and did school plays and got up in front of the neighborhood to do whatever, a magic show or something like that. And but I had many, many interests, still do actually. And so as I was going through school, I wasn't one of those people that's like, I always knew I wanted to be an actor. It was always something I was interested in, but among many things. And when it came time to go to college, I was I had a huge decision in high school where it was like, I couldn't do high level athletics and high level arts at the same time. So I had to kind of choose my sophomore year in high school, and I chose the arts, and I'm glad I did. I think I had much more upside in that realm than in the athletic realm. And then when it came time for college, I was thinking, well, I kind of music was a route I could have gone, and theater was another, and I thought, and many others, but I thought, you know, theater seems to me to be something that if you're involved in it, you're constantly learning for your whole life. You're always taking on new challenges. You're learning history, psychology, you know, arts, so many different things, literature. And so I thought, let me start there and see how I feel about it. And that's what I did. So, and it just kept being reaffirmed, like, yeah, this is good. I really like it. I seem to be doing well at it. And so it was really kind of let's see where this goes kind of thing. And it's continued to affirm itself for decades now. So. And by the way, I should say, just to kind of lead into Max's thing, that where I went to college was Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, which is familiar to Caitlin and familiar to Max. And now Max can show you how this kind of gets interesting.
Yeah, I haven't thought about it for a long time. It started with utter hubris. You know, I love doing theater. I did it for most of high school. I went to a program at BU over the summer of my junior year called the Boston University Theater Institute. And I remember standing around in a circle and talking to all the students there. And I sort of thought, well, this is really fun and this is really enjoyable. And but you know, I don't know what I'll do in college. And each one, when I asked each one of them, everyone said, oh, I'm going to be an actor. I'm going to college. I'm going to University for Theater. And I just remember thinking, well, I'm better than you guys. So then maybe that's what I should do. And see, I mean, like I said, I prep you for hubris. So I went to Northwestern University, where I think it's worth pointing out, it wasn't just that Erik and I both went there. We both had the same acting teacher. And I you know, this may sound like folklore, but when Erik auditioned, I hadn't met Erik before, and when Erik auditioned, he did his piece, and that he did part of the Iliad, and he did it, and there was just something about the way he handled the text, something that was it was so much about the text. And at one point I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "Oh, I'm from here, but I went to school in Chicago." And I said, "Where in Chicago?" He said, "Oh, I went to Northwestern." And I said, "Who is your acting teacher?" And he said, "David Downs." And I said, "That was my acting teacher." We had the same acting teacher. It really was like finding just another person who spoke the same language. And it was like during the audition, I could tell that there was something that I recognized. So then I went to Northwestern, and actually, like Erik, this idea of constantly learning, I think kind of fall in love with the idea that I would never get it. The theater was an art form you never got right, and I was fine with that. I was okay. I had a realization, sort of being okay, like I am happy to get this wrong for the rest of my life, and that was a pretty neat feeling, to be okay with that. I went to New York, and I spent about a decade there, working as an actor and as a dramaturg, and sometimes as a director, and then sort of looking for another way to engage. And at a particular point in my career, I went off to get a master's while still working as an actor to see what it would feel like. And I fell in love with academia. And after my master's, I went and got a doctorate at Tufts University. And then from Tufts here. Yeah.
Can we start with that, with what you both mentioned, specifically with David Downs, the shared acting teacher, and then how Erik handled the text? I want you to sort of speak about that more, whether there's a particular, can you speak about that more? What drew you to the way that Erik worked with the text? What is specific about the way that one might work with the text of an Iliad as contrasted with other theatrical texts? Can we dig into text a little bit more?
Well, so let's make this even crazier. Dennis, because there's something about the Iliad that lets this shine. And I want Erik, I think you should also speak on what you think it is that we sort of shared. But just to deepen this, Dennis Strinny, who wrote an Iliad, went to Northwestern and had David Downs as his acting teacher. Sorry, Dennis O'Hare, not Dennis Strinny. I'm sorry. Dennis Strinny is my old voice teacher. Dennis O'Hare went to Northwestern and also had David Downs as an acting teacher. So there is something, I mean, I don't want to give too much credit, but there's something Downsian about this, to coin a term. There's something about the way we were, say again?
How about nepotism?
No, it could be nepotistic, but there's something about the way that I think Erik and I were taught about the theater, that an Iliad, in its epicness, in its focus on language, it all links together. Yeah, Erik, I don't know I can talk more on that, but what would you say? What's that thing?
Yeah, it's a little bit hard, I think, to put your finger on, and I think part of that is because I didn't find David's approach. I mean, I think Max would agree. I know Dennis O'Hare would agree too. Just and he's a Tony Award-winning actor that's been in a lot of like phenomenal, films and TV shows. But it's not like this dogmatic approach, like this is how you do it. And
right.
It's really based, first of all, it is based on honoring the text above all. So the actor is in service of the play, and it's not about like, how can I stand out or this or that. It's really about, what role do I play in making sure that we bring the audience this piece of theater in its most effective form. And so I would say service of the text and service of the production is hugely important. And then to get there, I always found it was just like, you could take all these different avenues to get there. You had the key was to find what worked best for this text and this production. And so I think, and the Iliad, as you guys will see, comes at it from all these different perspectives. So I think there's probably something that Max picked up on of like, you kind of have to have, to borrow something from the play, like a full quiver. I mean, you have to have a lot of different ways to go about storytelling and acting in order to bring this to life. And somebody that was like really like, I don't know, just a specific, this is how I build a character, and might get a little stuck. They might be great at this part of it, but they maybe couldn't access another part of it. So I'm just kind of guessing, but that's kind of what I'm thinking.
That's certainly how I think about it. And I think what I saw, yeah, and an utter comfort in this kind of language, not trying to do anything, but instead really just letting the text sing. And the thing that I always think about is, and again, this is about being in service to the text. Actors communicate ideas, right? And so the idea has to be like a perfect diamond that you're kind of offering up, and the language becomes the way of offering that beautiful idea up. And I think that's how Erik attacks things. It's always and something that we share. It's always about what is the best way to make that idea kind of sing into the audience. And the way to do it is not to force it, and the way to do it is to understand it on a kind of profound and physical level. And I think that's what I saw. Yeah.
And that's true, the physical thing too. I mean, there was a lot about allowing, text and this idea, the driving idea to really inhabit your body. So David's stuff was very much about getting your body connected to your mind and to the text.
Yeah.
When you utilized the metaphor from the text of the full quiver, as I think about that metaphor framing the work of an Iliad, I mean, there are so many different modes through which an actor has to move in telling of the story, the narration of the story, the portraying a character firsthand. Will you speak to the different modes of storytelling employed in an Iliad and what it's like as an actor to move through them, what it's like as a director to help shape them?
Definitely. Do you want me to go first, or? Yeah, so it's really interesting in that the role I play is called the poet, and the conceit is that he has been telling this story of the Iliad throughout time since it happened. And so there's this wonderful layer of I'm not just presenting this sort of polished story like, hey folks, here I am, here's the story. He's having to call it up, and it's informed by all the other times he's told it, and it's informed by his failing memory, and it's informed by how can I best communicate to this audience in this theater on this day. And so he'll sometimes think, well, the best way to say that is by quoting a translation of the Iliad as we think of it, by Homer, who's, arguably a single person, but probably not. And so there's the heightened language of the Iliad, and then there's the very conversational language he uses as sort of a narrator in an Iliad. And beyond that, then sometimes he chooses to portray a character in a moment to make a moment come alive. Other times he just encapsulates what they said. He says this here, and then this happens. So it's an incredible blend of narration and reenactment and all this kind of stuff. And sometimes it's just storytelling and letting the words depict actions, and sometimes it's physicalizing those things in the moment. Sometimes it's physicalizing things without text. I mean, it's a wide variety of approaches.
Yeah, and it's been the most fun. The thing that attracts me to this play that I think is so great, and again, what I think kind of makes sense to both of us, is how do you tell the epic, right? Do you go out on an enormous set and have 100 extras and dress them up like warriors and go into training and like get Brad Pitt, or do you, in order to do the biggest thing possible, do you simplify it so much that it is simply a man on stage with a musician and that's it, right? And I think what this play does is it embraces the very elemental power of the theater to tell a story with that kind of simplicity. And so thinking of that as the foundation, we tried to do everything I ended up using the word organic a lot in talking about this, but just the most kind of direct and simplest way to do something. So in the original production, I'm not going to give anything away because this was only but we would have, how many different ways can we use a prop to do this storytelling, or how can we lay out this space so it is Troy in a really clear and simple way, so that becomes part of the storytelling. How can we introduce the most minor thing that the muse has in his pocket that is now part of that enhances this moment, right? And so it was always about those, how we can use the not, trying to stay as far away from the contrived as possible, and just what is here in this space, what does he have with him that all can help him tell the story. And so also stripping down things like as Caitlin mentioned, playing multiple characters, and just how can we make those the most basic and switches that are still clear, that each character is still full, and that the storytelling is really clear, but how can we do it with as little as possible, right? How, again, can we take the epic and just boil it down to the essential of what we're doing in this space? Part of this fed into, and it's a little out of the subject, Kayla, I hope it's all right, but part of this fed into, in the original production, what's this place going to look like? Well, we walked into this enormous warehouse that was filled with university junk that had just been stored there for years and years and years. And so we just said, can we have the junk? And they let us have a lot of it, not all of it. And we essentially built the stage and the foyer and the lobby out of what was laying around that space. Because it was about just reacting to what is here. Well, then that's where we tell this story. And I think we've tried to kind of direct it in the same way. How can we be as clever, as theatrical as possible with what we have in the most basic situation?
Something that Max said too just reminds me, which is a challenge for me, because I have done one actor shows before. And one of them at Theatreworks actually is the only other show I have had the good fortune of doing at Theatreworks. And it was a revival of I Am My Own Wife that we did back in 2008, I think. And anyhow, based on my prior experiences, I have a tendency, and I've also done a lot of audiobook narration, and so my tendency is to sort of make these kind of bold character choices to like really clearly define characters. And Max, in that vein that he was just talking about just kind of keeping it as simple and streamlined as possible, that's something that he has worked with me on in this production, and we'll have to again in the next couple of weeks. I'm just like, no, that's okay. We get it. It doesn't have to be such a huge shift. So it's a little different approach for me.
Yeah, it's been interesting. Nice, I mean, it's been interesting to figure out, that's one of the things we've talked about, what we're coming back to, like what we think we may have gotten right. You never know, especially because we never got an audience. We never got that audience to test this thing out and say, "Ooh, God, yes, that moment and over here." But I think Eric and I have a sense of what we got right, and parts. This is going to be a different show, but parts of it will feed into that. But then I think, Caitlin, you raised, I think one of the things we feel like we still have to work on those character shifts are really difficult. They present a real challenge, and so I think both of us are excited to dive back into those with kind of fresh eyes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm intrigued because to hear you speak about the sort of reduction down to the most essential elements, and then I think about how that collides with the fact that this is not exactly a two actor, a one actor play. This is right. a poet and then the muse. Well, starting with Max, maybe will you talk a little bit about the role of the muse and how I think I'm especially interested in how the collision between the complexity of working with a musician and the simplicity that you just outlined. Yeah. And then perhaps Erik can reflect on, and it'll have a different iteration, of course, this time, what it is to have a scene partner that is so different from so many scene partners that we are offered in the theater.
It's such a great distinction, Caitlin, because I'm constantly reminding myself to not call this a one-person show, because it really isn't. I really don't think it is, and especially having seen how Erik found ways to work with the muse, there's a really clear relationship between between Erik as the poet and the muse, who in our case is a cellist. So for the first iteration, Anthony Tan, who was up until recently, he moved to Canada, where he is from, a UCCS professor, wrote new music for the show. He wrote it for our original muse, who is also his wife, Jane Chan. She moved with him to Canada and is not coming back. So we, through conversations with Jane and through conversations with people all around Colorado Springs, we found Pam Chadden, who is a cellist, who apparently Diane and Mike know from their response, who is a cellist here in Colorado Springs. She has worked with Jane, and so we are continuing that tradition, using that music, although it will never be the same. It will always have what Pam does to it. And the muse is such a wonderful idea. Again, we're also talking about, because I think what Strini and Peterson's play offers is, again, this idea of the epic taken down to something flesh and blood and human, but just as exciting, right? So we get to create a muse, the actual thing that makes your heartstrings vibrate when you are creating. It is the touch of genius and invention, right? She exists on Earth. Here she is, and if you buy it, then you're going to have a great show, and if you don't, then it's going to be a bummer. But it's, here she is, to give you a kind of in on part of the conversation, what this transition has been. When we lost Jane, there was a real conversation about, can we can her music? Can she play it and record it? Could we play it that way? Does the muse become something else? And Caitlin and I had long conversations about this. And it came down to a very simple, the very simple fact of, to watch someone create music live is one of the most wonderful things. You can't replace that. There just isn't a replacement for that. To watch the bow hit the string and the music vibrate out to you. And so in some ways, though it may be manufactured and in our new iteration will be electrified, it's still this elemental thing of the muse is the bow to the string, and what's more inspiring than that, So in some ways, and again, I really think what the script is offering you is this. It's so well thought out. It's the simplest, and in that way the vastest. Yeah.
Yeah, I always have to catch myself too, because at this stage in the process, when it's just me and the script, yeah, it feels like a one-person show, but it sure won't soon. And it's a wonderful. The wonderful thing also is that what is talked about in the script. I mean, the poet keeps calling for the muse. He just desperately needs that to help him in his telling, what happens in real life for me too is that I get, just as he's bolstered by the muse in the play, I get bolstered by the muse. And it's just a wonderful thing to have somebody to play off of. And I'm so excited for you all to hear the music, because it is, I think, sensational. And I've missed it. I can't wait to start hearing it again.
Yes, as Diane and Mike point out in the chat, Pam also plays in a Baroque group, which I think is a particularly interesting juxtaposition with the fact that, as Max says, because of the nature of this production, you will be hearing Pam on the electric cello. And so to think about that sort of wide range of history and the instrument, which also brings me to one of the things that I find most striking about an Iliad is not only its evocation of this classic epic story, but also the way in which Lisa Peterson and Dennis O'Hare have woven in history and the vast and sort of devastating parade of conflict which exists between the Trojan War and our present day. Before we reflect a little bit on March 2020 to April 2021, I would love to hear you all share a bit about the role of history in this play and the history between the sort of epic legend of Troy and now, and what you think, what that feels like for you, what you think was going on for the authors, how the in-between weaves itself into an Iliad.
Well, there's something about, I mean, I felt very connected to that concept and that way of telling the story a year ago, but it feels somehow even more profoundly present for me now. I think partially because we're in the middle of something as a, you know, human race that we know will be a global marker, right, historically. And so that it feels even more like, yeah, these incredible markers, and sadly, so many of those markers throughout history have been wars. But one thing I think is just wonderful about it is that they don't restrict themselves in the telling of this story, in trying to communicate truths about war and about all the various things that stem from it, heroism and loss and community and mourning. All of those, they think like, okay, what is the best, which war can we reference to make that idea sink home the best? Or which battles, which historical references can we use to make this particular concept sink in the deepest? And I love that. Just like we were talking about theatrical devices, they use these historical devices to try to get to the heart of some of these ideas. You know, there's one place where you'll hear a reference to World War One, and I mean, you'll hear all sorts of things, but it's really, I love the way they choose those moments. And I think, Caitlin, what's been most profound for me, actually, and this can sound cliche, but I hope it doesn't, it's the way that, I mean, that's a long time ago, the Trojan War, we tend to think, but it just feels so universal. And I think that there's something wonderful about referencing all of these other wars between then and now, that first of all is very indicting, of saying, how in the world have we not learned better and progressed further in all that time? But also, I think it ties us in a comforting way to the suffering and mistakes and healing of history, in a way that makes us feel part of this continuum in a kind of restorative way as well.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Eric. I mean, I think that's great. I think you're right. It's that the play doesn't treat any one as more important than another, and puts them all in that place. And what what you recognize as the story goes on is, though there are moments in the Iliad that are specific, that seem specific to the Iliad, the death of Hector, the dragging of his body, things like that, the death of Patroclus. What the place promotes is the idea that those moments, those almost exact moments, have happened again and again and again, and that every war has actually had those moments, even if they're not exactly those moments. And I think it does it by a kind of process of accumulation, and by exactly what it's, the way that it opens up this world from a singular, long ago mythic war to something very real. And a part of it is pulling from the Iliad itself. You know, I don't know, and last time any of you have picked up the Iliad for a quick night read, you know, but on the one, you know, what will strike you, and what struck me when I went through it, one, it's an action film. I mean, it's so gory. There are just detailed battle scenes of how, you know, but then on the other hand, there are these, you know, written in poetry, in a rhythm, these highly detailed internal moments where you're hearing thoughts, and where discussions are going on, and there are debates, and there are, and you're getting such a clear, though they would never use the term psychology, such a clear sense of the inner workings of these different people. So it isn't all just clashing giants. It's also, and I think that gives this play the ability to have that kind of universality, for lack of a better word, that it's happened again, or attention to the repetition.
And if I may, I was just going to say what Max was just saying also about the idea that these moments, these very intimate individual moments have been repeated. To me, that's been incredibly poignant, put against the backdrop of COVID, where so often it's just this smear of numbers and it's this grand kind of lumped together awfulness. And this play just constantly reminds me, each life matters. You know, each instance is its own unique, special thing. Each loss is a loss, taken within a communal context, but each loss is precious, you know. So it's been very much more profound in that respect to me.
Thank you. I would love to go further into where you just started to bring us, Eric, with this question. I mean, I heard earlier the language of you know, this audience in this theater on this day, the idea of, you know, the story as a diamond, and we all know that diamonds look, you know, jewels look different in different settings. So how we've heard, how are you, and I know you haven't gathered together yet, so I'm sure this conversation will continue to unfold over the few short weeks that you have together before you welcome in an audience. But would you continue to reflect on how you held the play up to the lights in March of 2020, and now how you're holding it up to the light in April of 2021?
Max?
I mean, that in many ways that's been the question, right? Because it's not just that we're in a new place that is going to change the look of things, and it's not just that we have a new muse or that we're outdoors, but that is what does this play mean right now in this moment, which is always the question you ask. And I think Eric's right. I love what you said, Erik, about drawing attention to the importance of every life, and the how do you get away. The theater helps with that, to get away from that wash of you know, the front page of the paper with the same numbers over and over again, and they start to become meaningless. And so how do you become inured, you build up a protection against it, and so part of thinking of this play, so essentially to Eric's point, the story of the Iliad is not actually the Trojan War. It's 9 years into the Trojan War. The story of the Iliad is really the death of Hector. That's actually what the Iliad is. And so it is it opens, as our play does, with this opening line about the rage of Achilles, and then leading to the death of Hector. So the play the play and the original in its essence are built around this coming death, and then ends with an attempt to mourn that death. And so certainly in our original production, we were focused on, as the play says, our addiction to rage, and our as Erik said, our inability to get away from this repetition of war over and over again. But today, and my hope, the way I think about it, is that process of coming into the space, moving towards the fall of Hector, through the fall of Hector, and then into his mourning, can be a way out of that annulment, that we can experience that full cycle in person and in a safe but vulnerable way that we've pushed off so much in this present day, is kind of my hope. So that's become the thing that I'm focused on, I think.
Which sounds, yeah, I mean, I feel very much that way as well. I'm particularly drawn to the way the play ends, and I think it's somehow incredibly appropriate and potentially really profound at this time. So that's what we're going for sure.
Going for profound with this one, folks.
Yeah. One other thing, just about sorry, I keep kind of coming in with one more thing, but that it's very much on my mind right now, about the violence among us that's not war, that in our society right now. And this play asks us to acknowledge all of our capacity for rage, and the violence depicted in the play. I got to really kind of go there, and I'm finding like it's both a stronger calling right now than it was before, because I think it's important for us all to recognize that we have that capacity. So I've got to demonstrate that, but I also am finding it harder. I'm finding myself a little less willing to like, yeah, I'll give over to my basest, most violent instincts, but I have to. So that's part of the job.
Thank you both for that. I have, oh yes, perfect, Joan. I was going to be like, this is a wonderful time that if folks who have been listening up till now have questions or things that they want to dig into. Joan, did you?
I have, first of all, when was the play actually written?
It's a good, what, 2013, something like that?
Okay, all right. So basically,
Maybe more recently.
for those of us who have business and engineering degrees, how would you suggest to us that we prepare for watching this? And I'm not going to read the Iliad in a night, okay? I know that.
You don't need to prepare at all.
No, not at all. It's really accessible.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's in Greek. Did you guys not know that? Caitlin? No, nothing. Yeah.
Good, Max. Thanks.
It's incredibly accessible. It really is. I really think
Okay.
that. Yeah. You
And
just
when
come.
will tickets go on sale?
As soon as we get permission, as soon as Equity gives us the final stamp that we can actually do the show in person,
So
which
it's going to be
we have hoped will be tomorrow, and we're in our like second week of tomorrows.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
I assume that it's going to be very limited seating.
Yes.
Okay. So we need to get our tickets early.
Yes.
All right.
Joan's very good. Joan takes her role as like official salesperson and driver of urgency in these sessions very seriously. So yes, once tickets go on sale.
I'm also on the finance committee, and I worry about, even though our butts and seats numbers will be great percentage wise.
Yes, Deanna and Mike, outdoors, yes, at the End Center. So bring a jacket. Even in May, you can get chilly, as we all know out here in Colorado Springs. Yeah, I don't think it'll be that cold, but.
Dick, did you have a question?
Yes. How much have you, Erik and Max, interacted with Pam Chadden? I mean, musicians learn the music and they play according to what the director tells them to do, pretty much. And in some ways, she has a duller palette, brightly colored, but the variety of things she can do is not nearly what you can do, because you have face and voice and pacing and all sorts of things that you can bring to it. But in some sense, you have to agree on generally how this enterprise is going to go. And, it can't be totally impromptu every night, but there has to be some freshness in every night. And have you worked through any of that discussion of how to work this play?
So a couple of things. Yeah, it's been very funny working with both Jane and then Pam because of course musicians come in, rehearse once, maybe twice, and then perform. And we're like, no, there's 2.5 weeks of rehearsal, and they're kind of like, what do we do during 2.5? I don't. But why would you need it? What? Erik interacts with the muse not just musically. There are even though there's not lines, there is communication that occurs, and the first time around, those grew exponentially as the time went on, where they had these moments together. And Erik, you could really see him leaning on Jane as a crutch in certain moments, partially within the confines of the play, but also because Erik is talking for an hour and 40 minutes nonstop, and literally has had Jane there to help him go on. The way Anthony wrote the score is there are, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me because I'm not a musician, but Jane would point it out to me. He would do these things like, here are 8 phrases, hit this one and hit this one, and then you can mix the rest of these up in any way you feel like doing in a moment. You can repeat this 4 times, you can repeat this twice, and then go here. And so he created this kind of improvisational landscape that she could play through. And so Jane found her way through it. Pam will find her way through it differently, and she's going to do it. What's been so neat working with both Jane and now Pam is their excitement to kind of engage on our level of how do we think emotionally, how do we think about certain moments and rhythm in order to create an effect. And so it's really been on its toes, I guess, is the point. It hasn't been what I imagine a kind of standard, rehearsal for a musician, because there's been much more agency for the musician themselves to say, what do we want to do here? Okay, well, I actually have options to help create that moment. Yeah. So they have come and played in our sandbox in a really great way. Yeah. Previous question. 2012, yeah, 2012. That it was originally written in 2012. Yeah.
I appreciate your optimism about the weather, but there's about an inch. And 46 years ago, the first week in June, there was 2 inches of snow that fell at night. So you are not used to living in Colorado yet.
In
Illinois,
no, and I never will be, because how can you be? This place doesn't make any sense.
That is correct. And we lived for a brief time. We lived in about 1.5 years in Seattle, and there you could go 3 weeks in the winter where there was no more than a 10-degree change total between the highest and lowest temperature in 3 weeks' time. And in Colorado, there were rarely 3 hours.
I mean, it's Erik and I, this whole process, as Caitlin was saying, equity is about to decide these things. We are, and I think I speak for you, Erik, we're so happy to get back to work, right? It's like being able to taste again. But to do it in COVID means being more nimble than I thought I could be stretched to, and being okay with saying, like, we will make that decision tomorrow, and just having to do that. And the Erik and I have had to kind of, I mean, the costume designer has had to, she took her original costume and has had to like add internal and external layers, but then have a sun layer. So what about, I mean, and it's all just about, what are the X factors? And we're gonna just steamroll through, and yeah, it might snow on opening night. Right? I mean, but there's no other, or the other option is not to do it, Yeah.
So what we found in Seattle is we missed the adventure of weather. living
Adventure of weather,
part
yeah.
of your life. Weather is adventure. And I'm not being facetious at all. It is part of your life. And there was no adventure.
Well, I also hear, I mean, to what Max you just shared and what Tom, there's a connection for me as well in Tom's thoughts and then Dick's thoughts as well. This idea of, you know, there's the text that is scripted and then there is the liveness of the events. And right now we're just in a time where it feels like liveness is at an all-time high, right? The external world is coming to bear on productions in a way that could not have been anticipated 14 months ago. And so the kernel of responsiveness that we are accustomed to like holding in the enclosed event of the production is now something that like has had to spread to every aspect of the design and planning, that sort of not knowing, or we will encounter each event of the night as it comes. Like the technical director is living in the space and brain set of the actor much more than the technical director is accustomed to living in that, which, you know, Max is right, it's challenging, but also, yes, the alternative is also not. I don't know. I mean, that's all being said. I will also be, you know, I have 4 coats that I can switch in, whereas Erik's coats will be a little bit more prescripted. So
Right.
I'll have to make sure.
But you know, I'll be working up a nice lather out there, so I should be okay. Really quick, just so I don't let this all go by without saying it, I just have to let you patrons know that the level of commitment to artists and kindness and collaboration that comes from Theatreworks, from this amazing team, and far beyond Max and Caitlin, it's extraordinary. And so it's a really wonderful group of people. I feel very, very blessed to be working with them, and you know, and taking on this challenging, unpredictable adventure with this group of people, because I don't think it would be that way with everybody. Some others maybe, but this is a wonderfully supportive group. So they're good people to support. Thank you for supporting them.
Thanks, Erik.
All right, we'll sit in productive silence for another couple seconds and see whether anything bubbles up for anyone. I've gotten very comfortable with productive silence over the past
Bye, Joan. Thank you.
months. Bye, Joan. Enjoy your tacos.
Well, I hope I don't ruin the silence, but I was going to say one thing that occurred to me when you were just talking about that is that you know, it's funny because on one hand, for an actor, especially, I mean, I think doing a play with a really, really small cast like this is a benefit when we have all these moving parts otherwise that are out of our control, because, you know, part of a large cast show is coordinating, making sure everybody's on the same page. And I have found that with solo performance, in a way, sometimes it's almost empowering for things to be like, if something goes wrong at the very beginning. When I first did I Am My Own Wife in Denver, before we moved it to Theatreworks, like the opening night, a prop wasn't properly set on stage. Very first thing I interact with was wrong. And, you know, there's this moment of, you're like, oh my gosh, it's like, is this what it's going to be tonight? You know, and then you deal with it gracefully. Nobody notices. And you realize, I'm in command here. Like, I mean, I can handle that. I throw it at me, whatever, I can make it work. And so I think that that's a good, you know, I hope I'm able to bring that mindset to bear in this, because I think it's going to be helpful. And as Caitlin said, you know, people that usually don't have to employ those skills, like technical directors, are having to, and so we all will. But there's something about this particular show and small cast shows in general that really serve nimbleness well.
What you just shared, Eric, brings me back to one of the pieces of framing that Max brought to the idea that theater is an art form you never get right. And so you can spend the rest of your life getting something wrong, you know, and enjoying that. So I'm thinking about that as a lesson for how we've all had to wrestle with the past year, and we'll continue to need to wrestle as well. Finding that agency and finding the bits where we can shape the story. All right, lovely people. I'm going to say that we should go off to the next bit of our evenings. Yes? Yes. I am so grateful to Eric and Max for taking time of a Thursday to join us. And of course,
this was great.
Wasn't it? Yes. Yes. Very exciting. And of course, so grateful to you all, Sheila and Jordan and Michelle, and Diana and Mike and Gina and Tom and Charlotte's dog, apparently, and Dick and Sandra, and everyone for joining us. Really just whetting the appetite for sharing physical space with you all soon. It's just very grateful. All right, y'all. Shall we awkwardly Zoom wave each other into the night?
Thank
Shall
you,
we?
buddy.
Good
Thank you,
night,
Caitlin. See
everyone.
ya.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
See you there.
Bye.